It's my honor right now to introduce a guy who took superlative athletic talent and a superlative intellect and a career at the very top of corporate America in places like Procter & Gamble and KFC, and then had an impulse, I think an impulse that certainly came into my own life through my childhood experience growing vegetables and watching food come out of nature. Will Allen grew up on a vegetable plot and helping his dad make a living for their family by raising gardens, and then decided after all of these achievements in athletics and in the executive ranks of big multinational companies that he would take what he knew about organization and inspiration and combine that with what he knew about creating food in nature and become one of the world's leading spokespeople for urban farming and urban food production. We're very excited to have him here, Will Allen.
Food is such a powerful way of bringing people together. When I graduated high school, I had over 100 scholarship offers, and my goal was to get an education and play professional basketball. And I said, I'll never go back to that farm. We're able to move from less than 1% of local food production to 10%. That was $1 billion change. We're growing energy here. We're growing soil, we're growing people, and we're growing a community because we're anchored here in a community that badly needs food. So part of that, this whole concept is really about growing community as well as providing the most important thing to all of us, which is our food. Was in farming. My father was a sharecropper, but unlike many African American males at that time, he wanted myself and my brothers to know where our food came from, and for practical reasons to be able to grow our own food. As we sit here today, we're losing rural farmland and we're losing farmers. 1 million since 1960. Actually, I was driving down the street here at the time, back in 1993. I was working for Procter & Gamble in sales and sales technology, and I just saw the for sale sign, and I stopped and I wrote down the number. You know, I said to myself, this is the place that I could land, and that's when I got in trouble. I knew a little bit about the area. 5 blocks away is the largest housing project we have here in Milwaukee, called West Lawn. Was pretty much what is called a food desert, and the only access to food is corner stores and what they call fast food swamps. As a matter of fact, many of our kids are eating food that our grandmothers wouldn't recognize as food. I was just in Cleveland. I met with the mayor of Cleveland, and he really gets it. We're starting to get a lot of waste from food wholesalers. They throw away thousands and thousands of pounds of food waste a week. I want the same food to go to all all people in all communities. And to do that, you have to figure out ways of reducing the production cost. And part of that is what we do here in terms of growing soil by using renewable energy to keep the cost in line so we can get that food to everybody at a reasonable cost. People come here, they want to know, how did you do that here? You know, did you make that happen on these 3 acres? How can we do that? This farm system is a unique farm system. It's part of, I think, ag of the future in terms of how we grow food here very intensively, using every square foot, and everything that we discover, we pass on to folks that come here. It's not like we want to stick it in some closet and try to make money off of it. Everything we discover, we pass on to other folks.
I don't think I've ever interviewed anyone who was officially named a genius by a major foundation. How did you find out that you were getting the MacArthur Genius Award?
In our city, we have a lot of vacant land. In the Midwest, there's hundreds and hundreds and even thousands of acres inside cities. Cities like Detroit, cities like Youngstown, Ohio, and Buffalo, New York, Chicago, where they have 77,000 vacant lots, so 33 square miles of vacant land, that we can grow food. Believed in having a diverse group of folks to work with. So diversity is at the top of my agenda. One of the declarations I made with the city was that I would hire kids from the community. Then we started being looked at as an asset to the community because we were providing jobs.
I live 10 blocks up here, and I used to walk past here every day when I was in high school to go to the basketball court. And one day I just stopped in, love it here. I would have never thought that I would be doing something like this, but I love it.
Whoever wants help, whether they're from Detroit or some small rural community in Alabama or Mississippi or upstate in Wisconsin, we engage those communities. So it's not just inner city, it's not just urban, it's rural communities that are hurting today as well. But it's really all about food and how we are going to try to change the existing food system to make it something that really works for everybody. People think because they spend a lot of money for food, that food is fresh and good. But we know when food travels many miles, it loses a lot of its nutrient value, and the system that we need is to go back to those days where our food system was local. A sustainable food system is the only way to really end hunger in the world. The industrial food system, it hasn't worked. We have to change our food policy, our national food policy, and to do that we need concrete projects like this and others around the country to change policy. We just can't compete with going to D.C. and standing in line and trying to lobby for something. We have to prove that this works. We have to prove that this cash flows. It's something that we need to continue to grow. There's some challenges that we have to overcome to make it grow. Being a former athlete, you know, I like competition and I like challenges. I've always wanted to guard the best player, take the last shot in the game or whatever. You know, I like that kind of challenging. And if you can transfer that over into something like this, it becomes a very powerful and good thing for the community. Good morning. Well, it's not good morning in Wisconsin, but it's good morning here, I guess. It's still morning. When I woke up this morning, I looked out and walked out of the hotel, and I felt like I was back in Milwaukee. Same kind of weather that we're having. So, but it's great to be here. These things never work for me, by the way. So. for some reason. But it's great to be here, of course, to talk about the food system, and I know this area pretty well. I've been here quite a few times, and so I won't talk about all the bad things that are with the food system, because I think you guys know that our food system doesn't work, for most of us anyway. It doesn't work in communities like this or other communities in America and of course around the world. It doesn't work. We know that the industrial food system has kind of led us down the wrong road when they told us farmers back in the day to grow things like soybeans and corn fence row to fence row, and that's going to end world hunger. We know that tonight, 1 out of 6 youth will go to bed without a meal. We know that 1 out of 3 Americans today are obese. We know that if we don't do anything about the food system, the current food system, that 42% of us will be obese by 2030. But all of those things can be avoided if we just decide as a group of folks, as citizens, to change the existing food system, and we all have a responsibility to do that, because all of us want to live in sustainable communities. When I travel around the country, I talk to mayors, and they always talk about their 2020 plans to become green and sustainable by 2020. But when I look at their list of the top 10 things that they have to change within their cities, I find food at the very bottom, either 9th or 10th. And we know that food is the most important thing to all of us, whether we want to recognize that or not. Everybody here in this area, in the whole country, in the whole world, that's the one thing that we all have in common, is that we have to eat food to survive. And my thing has been always, since birth, because people always ask me, when did you start with this farming stuff? And it was really a legacy piece. Really started at birth, is that we have to, why not eat good food? We have to eat food, but we have to be able to produce that good food to be able to make this possible. And we all have a responsibility in doing that, whether we work for the government or universities or corporate companies or live in small towns or large towns. We all have a responsibility if we want to live in these sustainable communities that are safe and folks are prospering. And I think we have this great opportunity now. We have this wonderful opportunity now, because so many people are talking about food systems, and so many young people, over 70% of folks that want to be in the food system in the future are under 40 years old for the first time. So it's not crusty old farmers like me and academics that study the food system. It's all these young people that I run into that want to get involved in the food system, and the hundreds of different jobs and different categories of jobs and thousands of different jobs that I believe it'll create. Want to get involved, but we have to pass on what we've learned. There's a lot of knowledge out here that hasn't been passed on to this next generation, because I was just recently at a conference and they said, well, this next generation is just going to go with it. Well, they're not going to go with it unless we, us elders, pass on what we've learned, because that's the way we used to learn about how to grow food and how to distribute food to our neighbors and so forth. So we need to, we have that responsibility to pass on the good food and the knowledge of how to grow food, and all the different categories of jobs that could be created, from jobs that we don't think of as food system jobs, but things like planners and architects and renewable energy people. You can walk inside this hall and you can see all the different aspects of the food system and those potential jobs. So that's what it's all about for me, is to really, at this point in my life, I've been doing urban agriculture over 20 years in Milwaukee, and we've grown our system, our food system, and we're sharing those concepts with people from all over the world that come through our organization. We train over 1,000 farmers a year how to grow food and look at growing food in instead of hectares or acres, instead square footage, because you know, as we sit here, we're losing rural farmland and rural farmers. So we have to learn how to grow food in the most unusual places. Places that we never thought would be growing food, on top of asphalt and concrete and rooftops and everywhere, because more people live in cities today than in rural areas. And it's really unsustainable to ship food from California to Milwaukee. And by the time it gets there, sometimes it gets into our bellies 10 days after production, so it's not very nutritious. So we wonder why we get sick. Why are so many people getting sick from the food that we eat? So we need to go back to a local type of food system. Now, realistically, that's not going to happen overnight. But it's something we should be working on. It's something we should be building, going back to the days where if you lived in Ohio back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, 85% of the food was from that state, and now it's the reverse. When you think about Wisconsin, same thing. Less than 1% of food inside our cities, if you go into a grocery store, is locally grown. So if we can move that to 10% over the next several years, and that's what we're doing in Milwaukee, we're going to move it to over 10%. That is a huge change. 10% less trucks traveling the road, the environmental impact that'll have, the number of jobs that we'll create. Right now we have 110 employees at Growing Power. We plan to add another 150 over the next year. So we're going to grow jobs. It's a great opportunity to grow jobs, and jobs that pay well. Living wage jobs is what we have and what we're creating, because it's not going to work. It's not going to be sustainable unless there are living wage jobs. So that's where we're at. Our goal in the future is to build the world's first vertical farm, which will be breaking ground. We're on track to have 100 acres of greenhouse production in and around Milwaukee, to grow food year-round, because it just doesn't make sense to eat good food for 20 weeks or 25 weeks out of the year. We need to eat this food every day, have it available every day. To have local sections when you walk into a retail grocery store or a co-op, that you don't have to spend 2 hours looking for local food, that you'll have sections that say local food, so you can make that choice, because 86% of us last poll said we'd rather buy locally grown food. We'd rather know where a farmer who grew that food. Because if you go to most grocery stores and buy a steak, nobody in that store can tell you who the farmer was or how it was raised, whether it was humanely raised or whatever. Nobody can tell you that. So we need to get to that point. What I'm going to do, because I don't have all day, I have this PowerPoint, and I don't know if you've ever seen a PowerPoint. It has like 1,000 images, but that's what you're about to see. Most people don't believe me when I start it. I'll be sitting down a little bit because I just had a hip replacement, and a year ago I had a knee replacement. You know, that's from jumping up and down on that hard stuff. But I'm going to take you through this PowerPoint, and hopefully at the end I'll have time to answer a few questions, and after that I'm going to do a book signing here, a book that I took the last 3 years I was working on off and on, that's now available, called The Good Food Revolution. So I'll do that after the talk, but I hope to leave enough time for you to ask some questions about what you're about to see. This is what we're doing in Milwaukee at Growing Power, and a little bit about the history of how we got there 20 years ago, when I bought the last remaining farm in the city of Milwaukee. So I don't know if you guys can see it. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I know it's a lot of light here. Okay, I bought the last remaining farm in 1993. It was the last remaining piece of area in Milwaukee that was called, it was the green area where there were a number of farms, a number of greenhouse operations. And this is what it looked like back then. And these were the young people. They're over 30 years of age now, and they thought they were pretty cool. They were from the neighborhood. But there's something different about these kids than the kids that you'll see on the street today. The fact is, these kids had their pants pulled up. But you can see how close we are to our neighbors, about 200 feet. You can see one of the greenhouses that was in bad disrepair. It was glass greenhouses. We had an old chicken tractor that we used to move around the yard. And then we started scaling up our composting operation, because if you remember anything I say today about farming, it's all about the soil. We grow soil at Growing Power, large amounts of soil to be able to compost, to be able to grow the food that we grow. So we started back with these windrows at the facility, and we started vermicomposting with about 30 pounds of worms. Today on one farm, we have over 7,000 pounds of worms that break down our compost into worm castings. But this was the start. And these young people that you see in the greenhouse, again, are over 30 years old. And then we started this aquaponics program with these 3-barrel configurations. One was the weed tank, one was the filter tank, and one was the fish tank. You could grow 50 tilapia in about 6 months. So we had a number of those along the north wall of greenhouse number 4, and we grew a lot of bedding plants. And we used those plants to, the youth would come in and help transplant, and we used those to decorate the city and youth projects back in those days. And the back 40 was used to teach kids how to grow food. One of the things I noticed as I was going through this process, what many of these kids had really bad reading and writing skills. So one of the things that they would do is I would take them out and have them do something physical, and then bring them in and have them write about it. And it would lead to them wanting to dig deeper. If we were talking about the worms and the microorganisms they wanted to learn about, and we'd give them books to read, and their grades improved. So that's something we're doing in the curriculums around Wisconsin today. And one of the lost arts, of course, was canning. Hadn't been passed on, as many folks had left the South and left farming behind. They didn't pass on these skills for the next generations. And of course, life skills like using hand tools would teach the kids how to build these fish systems and other systems, and it would improve their and bring a lot more interest. And then more young people started hearing about what we were doing over at on Silver Spring there, and they started coming. I also worked with the juvenile justice system. Some of these kids had done some really awful stuff, and they were coming back to the community. So I used to take the compost over to their facility, put it on over the grass, and grow crops. And all of a sudden, these young people, when they transitioned back to the community, started giving back. They donated the food that they grew. We also used those bedding plants. We'd bring in compost and put it in the islands. In this particular case, this was a neighborhood house, a facility that took up a complete block. And they had a lot of car thefts. There were shrubs around. We removed the shrubs and planted flowers. And the result of that was we had the kids had summer jobs, and all of a sudden the car thefts went away because people started paying attention. They were looking at the flowers, and I guess the car thieves thought they were looking at them, so it became a really good crime-fighting tool. So those were some of the positive things that can come out of a local food system, even with growing flowers. We would take vacant lots where drug dealers would hang out, and people would just go by oblivious to what was going on. And we'd bring in about 75 yards of compost, and I call these flower explosions. We would plant these flowers, get the neighbors together, and one day we'd transform that vacant lot into something like this. And then the youth took care of those, and again, those drug dealers went away because people started looking at the flowers, and I guess they felt uncomfortable, and it became, again, a crime-fighting tool. And then folks from out west started coming to Growing Power because many of the native communities were suffering high rates of diabetes, and they wanted to start with the youth because many of the adults were not farmers and don't come from a farming background, and they thought that they would start with the youth, so they would come in. And then I would work in communities like Inglewood, where there was a murder a day in Chicago, and we'd put up hoop houses and grow food there, again, as a crime-fighting tool to get the kids off the street, to give them something really good to do. And then in 1995, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel wrote a front-page story about me working with these kids. And it kind of launched us into the turn of the century, and Growing Power really started to grow in terms of really following our mission and expanding. And this is what the facility looks like today. We're powered by a lot of solar energy, both for our electric and our heating our water, a number of renewable energy systems to run this 3-acre farm that feeds about 10,000 people. We're anchored in a food desert. You have to travel over 3.5 miles to a retail grocery store. So the only healthy food is in our retail store at the farm. In the upper left-hand corner is the largest housing project 5 blocks away in Milwaukee, and folks have no food. So this is what it looks like today, a transformation of the facility. We call this a community food center. And a community food center is a place where people can come and buy food and get knowledge about how food is grown, and where volunteers can come and help, and folks can come from all over the world to get training and how to grow. We're one of the only multicultural, multi-generational organizations of its size led by a person of color. Diversity is really important part. So these are, I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, are the people that come to our facility as we grow food year-round and our trainings go year-round. These are some of the faces of the folks that come to Growing Power. Over 15,000 folks came last year for workshops and trainings, and thousands come for to purchase food and to volunteer. Even these guys. It's all about locally grown food. It's all about, we really embrace every workshop, every training. We use locally grown food, local vendors for supplies and so forth. So it's really all about locally grown food, but it really starts with the soil. It's all about the soil, and we know this guy who rumbles through our neighborhoods picking up the waste, and I guess they want us to think that they think green. They say they have over 17,000 acres of wildlife habitat, but the only thing I see when I go to their landfills are seagulls and really big rats, so I don't know what they're talking about. And of course, these trucks are run on electricity, right? So they don't pollute at all as they rumble through our neighborhoods. But it's really all about the soil that can be produced by diverting that waste from that big green truck or yellow truck or whatever is in your neighborhood, by building the relationships with the people that have the waste, like Altera Coffee, where we get a couple thousand pounds of coffee waste, and Milwaukee breweries, where we get thousands of, just from one brewery, we get 80,000 pounds a week of brewery waste. And we're going to get Miller Brewery. They go through 2 silos of grains a day, so we're going to be composting this year we're on line to compost million pounds of carbon and nitrogen into high quality compost. And from some of my local farmer friends, we're in a state where we make a lot of hay. We have a lot of moldy hay, so we buy that. And fruits and vegetables that never leave the wholesalers, that we pick up from one wholesaler, 20,000 pounds a week. And this is part, this material is part of the recipe that we use to grow soil. Even the boxes go back into Mother Earth. So we do over 1 million pounds, 200 feet away from our neighbors. And people always ask me, how are you able to do that? Well, of course, the first thing that you have to do when you're doing community food projects is you have to engage your community. You have to get your community on board to be able to do these acts. So you looked at it as an asset to the community, and sometimes that takes a long time because we always want to just jump right into something and start growing and starting getting the kids and other folks involved, but you really have to engage the community, so that's what happens first. So this is one of our composting sites at our national headquarters. This pile is about 600 yards of compost. And then we teach people how to compost. This is one of our national trainings. We have them from January through June. When I get back in a week, we'll have our June workshop. And one of the things that we do at those workshops is project planning. Because a lot of folks come and they don't have an idea, so we use this very hands-on approach, artistic approach of planning what their project's going to be about, have it on paper. And as I travel around the country, I run into folks that have started their farms, and they always run and grab their plan that they worked at Growing Power, and their farm is exactly like what they visioned. So this process really teaches you how to vision. And then we teach folks how to make compost. And this is kind of a fun workshop. This is the one that I teach, composting and vermicomposting. And you get somebody up on that 4x4 configuration that holds about 40 wheelbarrow loads of carbon and nitrogen and kind of compress it. I can't do that anymore. But people are fascinated by the worms. Of course, the worms break down the compost into worm castings as fertilizer, as a fertility replacement system. And this 4x4 configuration is what most cities will accept because we have the screening that keeps out any vermin or other animals and so forth. So growing soil, you can grow it. That's about the smallest configuration to get the temperatures up to 150 degrees, and then you go from there. And you'll see later our large compost operation we have in Milwaukee. We also have a site out in the rural community at one of our 30-acre farms right outside of the city to be able to grow this wonderful soil. And once you have this soil, then you can feed that soil to the worms, and the worms break it down into worm castings. So this is our system that we built. We do this year-round. When we farm, weather is not an issue. Doesn't matter whether it's 50 below zero, we're farming. And these worms are wonderful. They're part of what I said earlier. I had 110 employees. I really have about 110 billion employees because these employees I really like because they don't talk back or anything. You just feed them and they just do their thing. So these are red worms. We have about 7 different varieties of red worms in our system. And as long as you feed them, this is a cocoon that produces, you have systems that are old as ours, up to 20 worms per cocoon. And it's a great transformative moment when it comes to, having one worm, kids somewhat excited, but when you put a couple hundred worms in their hands, it really becomes a transformative moment for them. Even for this guy, he's really into it, trying to figure out what's in the worm bin. And she found something very interesting in it too. And then because these are our livestock, I look at worms not as worms, but these are our livestock. As a matter of fact, we have over $300,000 worth of worms. We recover our livestock to work another day. So we use this screening method to be able to get those worms back into operation after they break down. It takes about 4 months for them increase in population by 4 times their number and break down the compost into worm castings. We have systems that are can produce 40,000 pounds every 4 months to systems that produce 300,000 pounds of worm castings. And we market those worm castings as a fertilizer. It's arguably the best organic fertilizer in the world. So when you look at that shovel of castings 8 months ago, that was food waste and carbon waste, and now it's the highest quality organic fertilizer. And then you can turn it into compost tea, aerate it to bump up the microbial activity. And we have a number of these worm depositories. They said this couldn't be done. They said that you couldn't do worms in our climate year-round outside, but the worms, as long as you can keep the compost, it's over between 70 and 90 degrees, the worms are fine. And these are just some worm depositories or worm nurseries. And then remember that 3-barrel configuration I showed you earlier that we started back in 1995? Well, I took that technology and turned it into this 10,000-gallon aquaculture system, aquaponics system, where you can raise 10,000 fish in a 10,000-gallon system. General rule is 1 gallon of water per fish. This operates off of one pump. This costs $5,000 to construct. Same type system, commercial system would cost you $100,000. So this becomes something that communities can use to be able to raise protein, fish protein in communities. And this hoop house has 2 systems. The one on the right has tilapia, 10,000 tilapia. The one on the left has 10,000 lake perch that are mercury contaminated in Great Lakes, and it's the favorite fish of Midwesterners, and if we had 1 million pounds of fillets today, we'd have them sold by tonight. But unfortunately, there's a moratorium on commercial fishing for this species because of the lack of numbers and the fact that it has so much contaminants in the flesh. So we can raise them this way in natural systems that also raise plants. So we're getting a triple benefit because these water systems are also our heating system for the greenhouse to grow all the other things. It's much more efficient to have large bodies of water to heat the greenhouse versus forced air. Much more efficient. We've saved 50% of our fossil fuel use from the days before we had these systems. So these are tilapia. You can raise these in about 6 months to 1.5 pounds from a fingerling. And these are lake perch, the favorite fish of Wisconsinites, tilapia, lake perch, tilapia. And that's pacu. That's the latest fish that we're doing research. This is a Brazilian black pacu. They eat only vegetables, nuts, and berries. They get up to 60 pounds. This one's about 20 pounds. They taste delicious. It's one of the best tasting fish in the world. We're deciding whether we're going to raise these. They need a little bit more space, of course, than tilapia or lake perch. But the many chefs want this fish. If we had, 1,000 of these, we could sell them very quickly. So this is one of the fish that we're doing research as part of our research. We also overwinter some koi, and we have some koi. We're also growing, to make this system really sustainable, we have to start thinking about how do we grow the feed internally. In black soldier fly larvae, we have a system that produces black soldier fly larvae, about 60 pounds a week. In this barrel, there's 200,000 of them. They're 42% protein. So fish and chickens, this would be a supplemental feed for them. Year-round production, of course, in the climates like you have here in Milwaukee and most places around the country, even so-called warm weather climates, we need to grow inside because of the bug pressures that we have and just to control the environment from all the wind and rain and so forth. So we are able to grow about 40 different crops in our temperatures that get 10 below zero and even colder with wind chills. We use compost to bank around those, so around the hoop houses, so no cold air can enter. In the four corners, we put compost, so we're not using any fossil fuels. So the temperatures get up to 150 degrees, and that's what keeps those plants viable throughout the winter. All the food that we grow is in new soil. The soil inside our cities is contaminated. We've tested soils, and you can pretty much take for granted that the soil is contaminated, and that's the reason that we have to grow soil. If we're going to scale up urban agriculture or even rural agriculture, you need to add compost to your soil, and we have to grow thousands, not hundreds of yards, but hundreds of thousands of yards of compost, and that's what we do. We build our beds on top of asphalt, concrete, rooftops. So when I go into a city, I look at space to farm because we're also a land trust. I don't necessarily look for land. I look at asphalt. When I see asphalt, I see a farm, a potential farm. If I see a factory that has 12 acres of asphalt, to me that's a potential farm because I have the compost to be able to grow food. Very intensive production. We're growing at $5 a square foot. That's 43,000, whatever, 800 square feet in a acre. At $5 a square foot, we're talking $200,000 an acre of annual production. Very intensive production. How do you do that? You have to have, your soil has to be very fertile to do that. And having fertile compost and worm castings, we can do that. Very intensive production. That's what it looks like. Sprouts, we're growing at $50 a square foot. So you're talking, if you're able to grow an acre of sprouts that take a week of production, you're talking over $1 million. That's my grandson. He wants to be a farmer. And that's my photographer's son. He's having a Zen moment trying to figure out what he wants to do in the food system. One of the top 5 best foods to eat, of course, is kale. It's almost indestructible in any climate, so we grow a lot of kale in the wintertime. And we have these rural farmers right on the edge of Milwaukee. This one is a 30-acre farm in Merton, Wisconsin. Very intensive production. It's all about the soil. If you get your soil right, you can grow this intensively. I tell you it was 1,000 slides. Maybe a Guinness's World Record. Intensive greenhouse production, trying to use every bit of space. This is a recent greenhouse. This is grown on top of asphalt. It's right in the inner city. This is one of our 23 farms that we now operate. We grew this a romaine lettuce. We started it from pelleted seed, and then we transplanted. It took 20 days in the greenhouse this spring. Very intensively planted. Using multiple levels of growing things like mushrooms and mushroom chandeliers, having these 750-gallon aquaponic systems, being able to use every bit of space in a greenhouse, taking a greenhouse space of, say, 3,000 square feet and turning it into 5,000 square feet of growing space. Growing sprouts. Again, it takes 1 week to grow these sunflower and pea shoots and spicy sprouts that go out to the restaurants, over 50 restaurants. A lot of our food goes through Cisco to the public schools. We've gotten food into the public schools. We grew 100,000 pounds of carrots that went to the public schools this past year. We're growing 250,000 pounds that'll go to the public schools. Mushrooms, to be able to grow oyster mushrooms that we sell for $16 a pound to the restaurants that help keep our programs running. Shiitake mushrooms that we dip in the water to enhance the blooming of those shiitake mushrooms, to shorten the timeline. So we teach folks how to harvest the sprouts, and this is one of our new farms that we're developing. There'll be 35 hoop houses. There's 16 there now, right on the lakefront in Milwaukee. And these are the young people that have been trained. They didn't know the difference between a hammer and a drill when they first started, and now they're able, and we have a 35-member harvesting team of professionals that harvest. We build these hoop houses from scratch, from straight pipe, and then we put new soil from our composting operation. We operate a 4-acre composting site not too far away from this site that we'll see in a few minutes. And then we intensively plant these hoop houses to be able to grow all the greens. In the wintertime, we bank these with compost on the outside and be able to grow throughout the winter. We plan again to have over 100 acres of these hoop houses in and around Milwaukee built over the next few years to really quantify a lot of things that you can change the dynamics of a food system in a city, because a lot of people don't believe that you can change the dynamics from less than 1% to 10%. So that's one of my goals before I retire, is to really quantify that piece, because then we're going to have all these young people that want to do it and participate if they know they can make a living at growing food differently than maybe our grandmothers and grandfathers grew food. Okra. Normally we have 1 month of okra production in our climate. We've changed that to over 4 months of okra production by growing it inside hoop houses. And of course, tomatoes. We had tomatoes this year into January without any kind of fossil fuel heat. Carrots, peppers. And we process everything at Growing Power. So we go out, harvest, comes back in, we process it, spin it dry, air dry it, then it gets packed out and goes out to all of our different, this is the preferred salad mix in the marketplace of Milwaukee, Chicago, and Madison, Wisconsin. And all of these different crops go out to our customers throughout the year. Renewable energy systems, anaerobic digester. I have a partner in this. We developed this anaerobic digester that takes solid food waste. We grind it into a slurry on the exterior. It gets sucked into this tank. It has a big auger inside. It's heated to 100 degrees. We produce acetic acid at low pH, so there's no possibility for an explosion. Then we take out 1,000 gallons of acetic acid that can be stored for over a year, and then change the bacterial makeup of the acetic acid to a high pH and put it in a methane digester and turn it into methane and run a generator to generate electricity. So we worked with the University of Wisconsin Green Bay microbiology department that did all the certified testing. That's my business partner, Mark Heffernan. And now we're going to build out a full-scale system both in Milwaukee and Chicago. Looks like soup, right? Solar energy. We built. We have a construction division at Growing Power. We built this pergola for our solar system. Each of these panels is the latest and greatest technology. Our energy company pays us 22.5 cents a kilowatt hour. We pay 10.8. So we're able to, offset our electrical costs by about a quarter. We also provide 70% of our heated water with this 24 panels that we constructed between greenhouse number 5 and 6. And we also capture all of the water off of our hoop houses and greenhouses. We have 30,000 gallon catchment systems that we capture all of the water and reuse that water inside and use those water systems as fish systems as well. We also have animals in the city. We have over 50 goats. And these goats are alpine goats. A friend of mine from Spring Green, Wisconsin is building a cheese plant on the south side of Milwaukee, probably the first of its kind in the nation, where farmers will be bringing their milk into the city and having it processed into cheese and milk. And it's going to be a wonderful project, and he's going to be processing our goat's milk. We also have 500 layers in the city, 200 feet away from our neighbors that produce brown eggs. And we also have honey. Honey production inside cities is very important. We get over 100 pounds of honey per hive, much more than rural communities, because we have all that flora inside cities. And the bees don't have to travel very far to get their water and get their pollen. So we teach beekeeping to the youth and to folks that come in from all over the world. And we have a label, urban, how's the time? Okay, 5 minutes. I'm going to have to step it up. These are some of the projects that we have. I wanted to show you. This one I really like. We work with a lot of folks with disabilities, but they're not handicapped, because this young lady in a half hours learned how to seed and how to harvest. She's totally blind. And we work with Catholic Charities, seniors, daycare. They didn't want to play cards anymore. They wanted to grow a garden. So we put in a garden on top of asphalt. Now they have a garden. Kohl's Corporation, one of the most successful corporations, they wanted gardens on their corporate campus. So their employees, they have a young staff of employees, one of the most successful, over 1,000 stores around America today. We built gardens, and they have an in-house daycare center, so daycare students are learning how to grow food and at a very early age and eat it. The mayor wanted to have a garden like the White House, so we put our interns put a garden. We brought in 50,000 pounds of compost and put it in front of City Hall. Now thousands of people can see food grown, and it's donated to Second Harvest of Feeding America. Rockwell Automation wanted to go. In Discovery World, we put our aquaponics system. It's a museum on the lakefront, so thousands of people can see. Forest Home Cemetery, the cemetery director called me about 5 years ago and said, we have greenhouses, they need repair. Could you take them down? I went and looked at them, we couldn't take them down and restructure them, so I said, well, why don't we just repair them and grow food right at the cemetery? So that's what we're doing. So we're keeping people out of that upper left-hand corner a little bit longer if they eat that food. So this is the cemetery greenhouses. Many cemeteries across the country used to grow their own flowers, and now they buy flowers. Jackson, working with Cisco, we have a corporate agreement. We operate a farm right across. Those are the two former farmers that participate in helping us. And this is where we're growing 250,000 pounds of carrots. Those are the carrots from last year. 100,000 pounds came out of that field. And peppers and zucchini that go through the Cisco system. New Berlin, this is another 10 acre, very intensively planted Washington Park, working with the mayor on our left, who's running against Scott Walker right now. So we, what can I say? I'm not going to get political. I'll shut up on that. But he's been very helpful in terms of moving. He's totally on board with urban agriculture, probably more than any other mayor in the nation. King Drive, we opening a deli and a food store in one of the biggest food deserts in the city. This is our 4-acre composting site. There's an old lagoon at the sewage treatment plant. And now we're doing thousands of pounds, hundreds of thousands of pounds of compost at this facility. Every day we compost. Almost there. And this is a farm that I just bought on the north side of Milwaukee. We're turning this into a fish hatchery. This farm, this facility was an old laundry facility. And now we're going to transform this into a hatchery and a processing facility because there's no processing facility in Milwaukee for fish. So the first thing we did was put up hoop houses. So we're growing food on the exterior, on asphalt. And that's where those earlier pictures of lettuce. At a fire station, they didn't want to cut the grass anymore, the fire guys. They called me and said, we have some land, can you put up hoop houses? We put up 4 hoop houses on fire, right behind the fire station. And now these are some of the supplies that we stockpile to be able to go out and do this. On 4th and Walnut, this is one of our latest farms. We built the fencing, built these hoop houses next to a business that offered us the land. And our crew came in, and now we're growing food there. Growing Spaces, taking a high school program to build a sustainable garage in River West neighborhood. All materials are green materials. The family will have a greenhouse on top. You can enter from the outside or the inside. Badger School in Madison, where a true agricultural school is going to open in the fall with the agricultural curriculum that we developed with the teachers. Boys and Girls Club brought in compost. Maple Tree, we have a 20-year lease with Milwaukee Public Schools to grow 5 acres of food, and we had the big celebration there in a food desert. Over 6 miles, people have to travel for food in this community. A lot of drugs, a lot of problems that have been alleviated by these young people working on the farm. Almost there. Work with the Blackfeet in Browning, Montana. Again, a tribe that we're gatherers and not farmers, but working with the youth. In Mississippi, one of our regional training centers, and Young People's Project in Jackson, Mississippi. Buffalo, New York, another Rust Belt city that put up 50 hoop houses and aquaponic systems to grow food. This is a shot of downtown Chicago. This is one of our farms in Chicago at Grant Park, probably the most aesthetic farm in the nation, growing 150 different varieties of fruits and vegetables and edible flowers. It's called Art on the Farm, a French protege design of a farm. Our farms can be very aesthetically pleasing and can improve the community's appearance. At Cabrini Green, probably the most famous, this is a peace garden that we brought 100,000 pounds of compost down on top of asphalt. Now, with gentrification, the Fourth Presbyterian Church funded this project. We've been running this garden for 7 years. Iron Street, this is the latest project in Chicago, a 7-acre farm and an old truck terminal. This is what it's going to look like. The First Lady has visited this farm just a couple months ago. Jackson Park, another park in Chicago, working with the Chicago Park District, we have another farm. Gallery 37 in downtown Chicago was the first project. Lozano School, these young students wanted a garden on top of asphalt at Ames School and backyard gardens with seniors. That we were at the Flower and Garden Show. This is our display to show that gardens can be very aesthetic. These young people work at all of these gardens in Chicago, and they would probably be doing something that's not so good. We have our CSA program called Market Basket that we've been doing since 1995, that we can get food. We also have done work in Kenya. That's a rudimentary fence around a landfill. These soil fertility issues are worldwide, and folks are engaged in growing food inside cities and close to cities. Ukraine, Central London, another project that we're involved in. And I'm just going to go through, these are some of our regional training centers. We have 15 around the U.S. in different places. This one's in Mississippi. We have them in Arkansas. Okay, we're going to shut it down. Okay. Thank you very much.